In this video, I'm going to teach you how to work with a PDF floor plan. We're going to define material swatches and apply and scale material swatches. We're going to learn how to apply highlights and shadows and add leader lines and annotations. And then we're going to close with learning how to add camera indicators and scale figures. So the first thing that I've done is I have opened up a PDF of a floor plan of a master bathroom, and we're going to render this. Now, a couple of things that you need to be aware of is that it's coming in on a student version of Autodesk, so you can see there's going to be a plot stamp there that we'll get rid of. And it's also coming in on the alpha layer because Quartz doesn't have a background, and so there's a clear background here. That's what you can tell when you see the gray and white checker boxes behind it. And so the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and rotate our image. And let's go ahead and go over here. And we are going to rotate it actually counterclockwise, 90 degrees. Okay, and then we're going to, we're going to create a marquee here. And we're going to do a layer via cut. So it's going to pull it from the background. And we will go ahead and delete that layer there, rename this floor plan. And now I'm going to create a new rectangular marquee, a new layer. We're going to call this the white background. We'll fill it with white. And then switch our layer order. And you can also hit Control E, or you can go to layer and hit merge down, and that will compress those two layers right there like that. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you some things that I have open right now. The first is I actually have a sketch here that I created, and it's a little bit messy, but it shows very quickly what materials I am going to apply onto this floor plan. And it's really helpful because it tells it to me using both color here that's applied quickly with my rendering marker, using kind of a parallel strokes here and cross hatching here. But I'd also indicate some labels and annotations over here. And this is really helpful because this tells me what I need to find as far as swatches go before I begin to render. And I've already done that. So that's there. And then we're going to go back over here now. And we need to begin by defining some material swatches. Now, the way that Photoshop thinks about rendering a floor plan is actually kind of unique. It creates a series of swatches or layers that are related to this under or this basic kind of primary layer here, and connects the two so that they don't get moved very easily. And so that's really, really helpful for us. But before we can actually apply anything, we need to make sure that we have all of our material swatches defined so that they can then pop up and be applied quickly in a moment. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to open my wood finish swatch, and this is a seamless, really high resolution finish. And I'm going to go over to edit once this is open, and I'm going to hit the button define pattern right here. And so you're going to get a dialog box, and you can change this to whatever you want. I'm going to just leave it as is because I've grown used to that title referring to this image. So I'm going to keep it there. Any of the other swatches that you need to create, whether it's, finishes or, shower floor mosaics, anything that you want that you have called out on your sketch, you can go ahead and produce that same workflow by opening up the swatch, going to edit, and defining the pattern. And you won't really notice any change to the swatch itself, but what you will see is it'll pop up when we go ahead to define that on our floor plan. So what I'm going to do now is go back to my floor plan here, and you can see I've eliminated any of the unnecessary text or annotations that came in from AutoCAD. I have also made sure that all the walls themselves are pochade in. There's some plumbing walls and some other things happening within these walls that would add extra lines, and we don't want to see any of that on a rendered floor plan. We want it to just be nice and simple. So what I'm going to do now is begin by applying that wood floor finish to our floor plan. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And now I'm going to grab my magic wand tool, and I'm going to click on all of the areas that are going to need that wood floor applied. Now there's one thing I do want to draw your attention to is it's going to be a lot easier if this process happens within a closed loop or a closed enclosed space. And so this is going to be a problem right here because of course we need the wood swatch to go inside this door swing, but it doesn't have a place to stop over here. So before we do anything, let us go ahead and create ourselves a little marquee here that's a black box here. And I'm going to go ahead and keep it on this same layer so that it reads as part of the floor plan itself. Okay, and so that line there indicates that there would be a change of flooring from here to whatever happens in the rest of the residence. Okay, now we're ready to start to apply the wood flooring. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit this magic wand tool up here, and I'm going to start to click all of the areas that would have wood flooring. Now you can see it's bound by line work here. So we have to make sure that we get everything. I'm going to hold down my shift button to grab and add additional elements here. If you grab something that you didn't mean to grab, you just hit Control Z for undo. Okay, and so you can see we've got all of the selected area highlighted. And now I'm going to go down here where we see our this little icon that's a circle that's half black, half white. And this is an adjustment layer. And here you can see I'm going to select pattern. And now all of the items that I have defined as patterns will appear right here. Now, the only issue with this is that you can see the scale is not right. So if we think of an entry door to a bathroom as being 36 inches and floor, wood plank like this or wood look tile like this, which is what this is. It's not going to be actual wood. It's going to be a tile that's made to look like wood, so it's waterproof. Something like that would be 4 to 6 inches wide. And so we need to hit the scale button and we need to increase the scale just a little bit so that we see about 9 planks on that doorway. You can see here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's pretty good. And so they're just a little bit over 4 inches wide. And so I'm going to hit OK right here. And that pattern now is defined. However, it's going to look like almost like a coloring book. It's going to look really, really flat if you just leave it as is. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to double click right over here. And it's going to bring up this dialog box. And now I'm going to provide an inner shadow. When I click this box, go ahead and look on the perimeter of that pattern that you see. I'm going to go ahead and hit inner shadow and see how it just brings a little bit of a shading in. If I want to make changes to that, I can click on inner shadow. I can increase the size just a little bit. I can increase the distance if I want. I can increase the opacity so it's a little bit darker. And you don't necessarily notice it as you make these changes, but to a viewer looking at this for the first time, it's just going to have a really nice soft glow that's going to make it look not like a bad ransom note where we've just applied pattern and we can't really see kind of the soft nuance. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to do that for every single pattern. I'm going to define the pattern of the swatch. I'm going to make sure that it's scaled properly based on the size of the material. And then I'm going to add that inner shadow to everything. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to do the pattern on the shower floor, and I'm going to do the pattern on the countertop here, and the pattern on the shower fixtures here, which will be gold. So you can see now that I have applied the countertop finish as well as the gold hardware over here. But I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about your shower floor before you create it yourself. Now this one is going to be a little bit tricky because you've got all of these other elements inside that you can create patterns for, but you'd have to zoom in really, really far to get everything, you know, gold like you want it to. It would be sufficient, most definitely, to just create the mosaic pattern here for this entire floor as opposed to breaking it up. And so the way that you can do that is to go ahead and create a new layer. And let's go ahead. I'm just going to grab it here and create a marquee, a rectangular marquee. And I'm going to right click and do new layer. And hit OK. And then I'm going to right click and hit fill. And up to this point, we've just done color here. But if you drop down here, you can also select a pattern from here. And you can see this is my pattern. I want to go ahead and use the brick, or pardon me, the Carrara mosaic. So I'm going to hit OK. And you can see it's tiling just a little bit. So I'm going to adjust the size of that. Oh, it may not let me. See, you can see here. Let's see. It's not going to let me make adjustments. Interesting. Okay, well, that's not going to work because we need to adjust the scale of that. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and delete this, and we will create a pattern this way. We're trying to get it just the right size so that we don't see too much pattern. That's a little bit better. So then we'll hit OK. And then, as I've taught you before, we're going to go ahead and select. Make sure that we have that inner shadow in. I'm going to bring it in just a little bit larger because I had reduced the size of mine before. There we go, looks good. And now I want to teach you how to address the white spaces here. So we've got an undermount sink within our kind of onyx countertop. We've got a white commode here and a white tub. And we also have this white shelf here as well. Now, even though in actuality they would be white, very white, if you leave them white like this, they almost just look like you forgot them or they're unrendered. So what we're going to do is also fill in these areas. And so the same thing, we're going to go ahead and make sure we're back on our correct layer. And we're going to grab all of the areas that are going to be white and make sure we're holding down our shift button. We're here, we're going to, instead of doing a pattern, we're going to do a solid color. We're going to come and just have it be like not bright white, but a little bit of a softer white. We'll hit OK. And of course, making sure that we add in our inner shadow so we get a little bit of softness to it. And the last thing that I'm going to do is just come in there's a couple of areas that are glass. And so this is optional. Some people do this, some people don't. But what I'm going to do next is just add in some indications of glass for the spots here where you've got a window. And so the same thing here, we're going to click inside. Undo because I grabbed too much. And then same thing. We're going to do a solid color, and we're going to do just a really, really soft blue. Again, just so that it doesn't look like it's unrendered. We forgot a little piece over here, so we'll come back and grab that. And to make sure that it matches, we'll pick it up from here. Okay. And the only other thing that I'm going to do now is just come back in and grab the couple of areas over here and here that would also be white. And I'm going to render them in now. Now you can go ahead and change the names of your layers over here, but I don't always, just because I can see so well what the layer is actually referring to. But if you want to, you can. And then you can see here, there's a couple of areas right here that I missed, and it's just as easy to go back with those as well. So you have to go to the layer, the original layer selected, and then once it creates a new layer, then you can merge if you like. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is teach you how to create some highlights. Now, there are some shadows that are naturally coming in, but it's really, really fun to do some highlights as well. And the place that we always see highlights is coming in from a window, right? So what we're going to do here is a really cool trick that works nicely on the edges of windows. And it's also really nice to do if you have hanging fixtures or pendant lights on an elevation. But we're going to go ahead and begin by creating a new layer. And we'll call this window highlight. And then I'm going to use my paintbrush tool over here. And I'm going to make sure that I select a nice big circle. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm selecting my circle. I'm adjusting the size up here, making sure it's nice and soft. But I'm making it so that it's about the size of my window and just a little bit bigger so that I'm going to get light where I hit this button. The next thing I'm going to do is select the swatch. This is the color of my light. And so I want it to be kind of warm, like almost like candlelight, a nice warm beige. And so I'm going to hit OK. And then what I'm going to do is click right here, and it's going to create a little puff of light. Okay. Now you see it on the outside, but you don't see it on the inside, and that's because the layer order is preventing your visibility. So now you can see if I move it to the very top, now it comes through just perfectly right through. If you want it just a little bit brighter, you can come in like that. And then all you need to do now is get rid of the color that's on the outside of the window, as you wouldn't see that. So I'm just selecting and hitting the X button, Control X. You can see there's more I have to get rid of. And that gives an indication to the viewer that there's light coming through the window. And it's a really soft, really nice effect that just kind of adds some warmth to your plan. The next thing that I'm going to do is add in some leader lines. Now, this plan definitely has a lot of information that we could share, but we're just going to share information about the finishes. And so what I'm going to do now is teach you how to create a leader line and some annotations. So you're going to go down to your line tool. Yours may not look like a line. Yours may be selected to look like a rectangle. So just go ahead and hit your drop down menu until you hit the line tool. We're going to adjust the fill of our line so that it's dark. You could do it in black. I tend to go a little bit softer than black. I'm going to do a light gray. And the width we will set, you can set it to 5 for now, but the height is what's going to be really important here. The height is the thickness or the line weight. And so now what I'm going to do is go back to my sketch that I have, make sure that I know the notes that I'm going to be calling out, and then I'm going to click and drag. Now, this is going at all different angles. However, if I hold down my shift button, it will constrain it to stay at a 90 degree or a multiple of 45. So I have my line right there, and there it is. Now you can see here, it's still pretty thin, so I'm going to go up here and adjust the size of it. It's misbehaving. I'm going to delete it and draw it again. You can also adjust the thickness or the line type here as well. Maybe we'll go a little bit bigger. Let's see how 10 looks. Much better. Okay, so once I've got that, then we can adjust the size a little bit. We don't want it coming out too much. I can move it as well. This is shape 1. I'm going to rename this leader line. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a text box next to it. And I'm going to make sure that my text is the same color as the leader line. Something's wrong with that layer. It's the opacity is a little low, but that's okay. That's easy enough to adjust. So I'm going to label this. Reduce my text size a little bit. And so what I need to do is move my leader line and my text box. And I'm just using my arrows to adjust it. And I need to figure out exactly why that line is coming in so very light. We can just barely see it, so we may need to make it a little bit darker. Okay, here's how we fix that line that's too light. So I'm going to click on my line tool again and make sure that it's ready to draw. And I'm going to click here, holding down my shift button. And I'm actually going to change this. It always keeps correcting back to 1 pixel. So I need to hit enter, and then it'll get nice and thick. And then what's really cool is when I go over here to move it, here it looks okay, but if I was going to put it over something dark, you can also make sure that it has a little outer glow to it as well by clicking outer glow. And then you can see it'll put a little bit of light around that line just so that the viewer can follow it all the way out in case it overlaps the dark wall like that. I'm going to go ahead and move my text box down just a little bit so that it aligns. And that is how you create a leader with text. The next thing that I want to teach you is how to add camera indicators. Now, for our purposes here, we're not going to have a perspective of this floor plan, but in a lot of projects, you have one major floor plan and you have lots of different perspectives within. And it's so helpful for a viewer to be able to see where the camera angles are being taken from. So I'm going to teach you how to do that now. In order to create a camera indicator, what you do here is grab your polygonal lasso tool. And let's say I want to have a perspective where I'm standing at the door and I'm looking at this back wall. So I'm going to do my polygonal lasso tool here, here, and then back here. And that's showing my camera view. Now what I'm going to do is hit this gradient box right here. And I'm going to hit this button up here. And this gradient actually tells you how do you want this to fade out. And so I want to go from my swatch color, whatever my foreground is, to transparent. But I need to change this. Instead of going from gray to alpha, I need to go ahead and go from white to alpha. And you'll see what this does in just a second. So then what you do is you grab your line. Let's take a look. I'm going to undo that command again. Something's going wrong. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. Okay, so in order to create our camera view correctly, I'm going to hit the new layer button. And I'm going to rename this camera view. And I want to, before I do anything else, I want to make sure that my foreground color is selected. So now I'm going to create my triangle here. I'm going to start where the viewer would be standing and then show the extents of the camera view. And then I'm going to hit my gradient button. Make sure that it's set from foreground to alpha. And then I'm going to click from here and drag. This is me telling Photoshop where the foreground, the direction that we want it to create the gradient from foreground to alpha. And then you let go and you can see it's going from the foreground color, which is that swatch down here, to alpha, which is clear. And then so that it's not so distracting, I'm going to bring down the color just a little bit. And then I'm going to deselect it. And then what you can do is create a text box right here. And let's say you wanted to have your rendering and it was going to be rendering A. And then on your board, your fictional board that we're imagining that this is a part of, you have a perspective that says perspective A. And that's how your viewer would be able to connect one for the other. The next thing I'm going to teach you is how to add a scale figure in. Now, a scale figure is really common in perspectives. Sometimes you see them in elevations, and they definitely should be, but you rarely see them in floor plans, and they can really add so much to a rendered floor plan to make it look really good. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and grab this scale figure. Now, I've made some edits to this person. I've created a color overlay on top of them, and just to try to kind of blur out the figures, it's a little bit more anonymous. I have also cut off the front of their legs, and you'll see why in a second. So what I'm going to do is grab my magic wand tool. I'm going to click out here, and you can see it's grabbing the white. So I'm going to right click and do select inverse. That will grab the person. And then I'm going to hit copy. And Control V for paste. And then I'm going to hit Control T to transform. I'm going to hit 180 and enter. And then I'm going to move this scale figure right here. So you can see his hands are over the sink, but his feet are kind of in where the toe kick would be. And once again, I'm going to bring down the opacity so he just kind of goes away. All it does is just give you an indication of how somebody might work within this space. Again, not necessary, but it makes a really, really nice effect. So now you know how to define material swatches. Remember, everything that you bring in, you have to define it as a pattern first. You know how to apply and scale material swatches by adjusting that little arrow to make it exactly the right size. We know how to apply highlights coming out the window or through the window, and shadows where we do an inner shadow around all of the patterns that we define. We also know how to add leader lines and annotations to indicate finishes. We can create a camera indicator that will now guide our viewer to reference this plan against a perspective. And we know how to add scale figures. Now, once this is finished, all you have to do is export it or save it as a JPEG or PDF, and you are ready to share it.